well, just to give you a few examples. Okay. So what do you need, right? So you probably won't need up to 15 gigabytes of the storage available the whole time, and especially for this particular one, we'll probably be using less than that for sure, just because we're doing a 2D game. Most 3D games are probably going to require on the higher end of the memory, but just make sure you have admin access as well, and then choose your text editor, whatever it is. Go ahead and have something ready. Let me go ahead and hand it off to Ishpreet.
Hi, I hope you can see my screen. So the first thing you need to do to access the project is download the zip file we provided and extract that. Then open Unity Hub and add the project. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Just click on the add button right here and select the folder that you extracted from that zip file and click open. And then you should be able to see that on this list right here. So next, make sure that your Unity version matches the project's Unity version right here. So that's 2019 4.10 F1. And the target platform is set to the current platform. Then you should just be able to open the project by clicking on it. So if you're not using Windows, it'll ask you if you want to switch platforms or exit Unity. So allow it to switch platforms, and then that will take about a minute to import all the assets. So while some of you are still waiting for the project to load, I'm going to go ahead and show you a little preview of Unity. So in the middle of the screen, you would be able to see a preview of the game. This is called the scene window, and it is an interactive view of the game. That means if you want to add an object to the game world, you can just drop it here. You can also select an existing object and modify or delete it. The window to the left of it will be called the scene hierarchy. The project we will work on has just one scene, that is the fighting scene. But for each scene in your game, this window would display a hierarchical list of all objects in the scene. Some of these objects may be further composed of other objects, and you can click on these little arrows on the side to expand that information. Next, the inspector window. That is the window to the right of the scene window. You can use it to view and change the different properties of an object. The transform properties define where to place something on the screen. The sprite properties define how it will look like. And the animator, you can use that to set its animations. There's also a project window on the bottom left of your screen that would let you browse the entire project structure. So you can go through the different directories, subdirectories, and files that are used by your project. So some of this might seem a little confusing to people who are using Unity for the first time, but we're going to try to keep this workshop simple by working with a 2D game. So you don't need to worry about 3D models, 3D animation, and some of the more complex tools that involve the third axis. Now, I hope you were able to open the project. And if you open your Unity window, you should be able to see a screen like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on my player in the scene hierarchy. And I can see that it got selected in my scene window. And I can also see its properties in the inspector window. Now, if I double clicked on our player, then that would zoom my screen onto the player. There are also other alternate ways to move around in the screen. So try holding your middle mouse click button or the right click button. that should take you to the hand tool, and you should be able to see that hand logo on your screen. And then you can move around in any direction. You can move your cursor around to basically pan in any direction, left, right, up, or down. If you can't use the mouse, you can also hold the Alt button on Windows or the Option button on Mac to get to the hand tool. And then Alt plus left click would let you pan, and Alt plus right click would let you zoom in and out to the center of the screen. And this kind of a zoom where it zooms to the center of the screen is called a constant zoom. There's another way to zoom. That is, you can simply scroll in and out using your scroll wheel. So I can just scroll out of this player, and then I can point my cursor to the other player and then scroll into that. And that also panned as it was zooming instead of constantly zooming to the middle of the screen. So before we start coding, you should try out all these features and make sure that you're comfortable moving around the scene. Knowing how to control objects in the scene is also very essential. And to demonstrate that, I'll show you how to place an animation on the screen. If you look at the project window, you can see two root folders, the assets folder and the packages folder. The packages folder just contains the libraries and external extensions and all those third-party tools that we'll be importing into our project, whereas the assets folder would contain all the files that we create for our project. So I want everyone to go into the assets folder and then the animations folder. Our player's name is Ken, so I'm going to go into Ken's folder. And here, if you click on any animation, you would be able to see how it's defined, what is the state diagram for it. You can click on these transitions to see how the transition between different states are defined, and you can see the different parameters for the animator for that animation. Now I want everyone to go into the Ken raw files folder. So if you're in assets, animations, Ken raw files, you should be able to see all the 2D graphics that we have made for this game. And we've imported the graphics that we've imported for this game. And you should be able to see on top these five fire frames or like graphics. And what I want you to do is click on the first one and then hold the shift button on your keyboard as you click on the last one. And this should select all of the five fire frames that we have over here. I'm gonna zoom out and reset the view, and then I'm gonna create our first animation. So all I need to do is, once I have these five frames selected, I'm gonna drag and drop them to the middle of the screen, and then just give it a name. I'm gonna call it fire, and hit save. And yeah, that was it. We have just created an animation. And as you saw, if you already have all the frames for an animation, for like a simple 2D keyframe-based animation loaded onto your project, then it's very simple to create an animation. All you have to do is just select the frames and drag and drop them to your screen window. Right now, the newly created animation looks pretty small. So I'm going to change some of its properties in the inspector window. I want to scale it up in both the x-axis and the y-axis by a factor of 5. I can also scale it up by dragging the edges of this box, or like the corners of this box that are displayed around the object. And I want to scale up proportionately in the x and the y-axis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Shift while dragging so that this happens proportionately. And now it looks like the animation is vertically inverted. So I'm going to flip it. I'm going to rotate it in the x-axis by 180 degrees to fix that. And now I should be able to move around the object as well. So another little note about this user interface. So you can change the placement of these different windows just by moving around their tab headers. And then once you have a placement of these windows that you're comfortable with, you can go to the layout a menu on top right and save that layout. And you can also switch to one of the preset layouts that are given in Unity. So to the left of the layout menu, you can see the layers menu. So you can basically split your project into various layers and then hide or lock these layers when you're not working on them so that you don't accidentally change those layers. And some of these layers are built in, but you can click on edit layers to define your own like user defined layers as well. So there's one more thing we need to do before we can start programming. We need to tell Unity which code editor we want to use for opening C# script files. For that, we need to change Unity's preferences. So I'm going to go to the preferences window right here. So to open this window, on Windows, you would want to go to Edit and then click Preferences. And on Mac, go to Unity and then click Preferences to get access to this window. Once you're here, click on the External Tools tab. And on the top of this tab, you should be able to see this option for External Script Editor. Click on the drop-down menu and choose any editor that you want to use for this tutorial. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. I selected that. And now if I go back to Project, Scripts, and try to open a script, it should open in VS Code. Great. So it looks like we are ready to start coding. But before we begin, I would like everyone to click the play button on top of Unity to try out what the game looks like at the moment. So we can see the fire animation that we just created, and we can see that the challenger is running and jumping towards our player. Click on the play button again to stop this test. And now I will pass the control back to Rolando so he can show you how to program the player's moves in C#.
All right.
Does anybody have any questions so far regarding anything to what we have covered so far?
Okay. Then I'll go ahead. Let me go back to that part then. Where are we at? Let me go ahead and close it. This is the part where you go and go to the external tools. That's where you add it for when you associate the Visual Studio Code. It's through the external tools. Okay, so to add it at the bottom of your desktop, you'll see the Unity Hub down here at the bottom. When you open it, it'll be like this, right? I'll go ahead and start here. So you'll just click Add, and then you'll go to where you have your unzipped folder, and that's where you're going to access the files. So you just double click on a project there, and that'll just open it up from there. let me switch to my other screen here. So you'll go to the edit, I think it's preferences. Preferences, yeah. Okay, yeah. So you go to edit, and then you go to the preferences under edit on a Windows computer. This is the preferences window, and then it's just up here at the top on the external script editor. The Unity Hub is what gets installed. Yeah, if you just run it, if you run the Unity Hub, it'll open up and it'll be on your taskbar. So you just go here and you'll associate whatever editor you want to use. It doesn't have to be VS Code, but it's the nicest one. Okay, so let's go ahead and keep going. Okay, so yeah, as we were saying, Unity is going to be running in C#. That's where most of the scripts that you'll be using. Keep going. Yeah, that's most of the scripts that you'll be using. They're going to be in C#. That's predominantly what you're going to find online when you look for resources. It's the most available one that you'll see in C#. It's going to be just scripts, so you're not going to be developing a full-on program using C#. It's just going to be, you're going to be creating objects. And then these objects, you're going to be creating instances that you're going to be accessing them. But it's going to be Unity that's going to be controlling everything. So it's just kind of auxiliary files that you're going to be creating and associating them to objects within the game. And here's kind of a sample of the way the variables would be. It's like any other programming language. You'll have the variable type, and then the variable name, and the value that you're going to be associating to the variable. And this is how the functions are set up as well as most other programming files you'll run into in C#. It's all going to be the same. You'll have the access specifier, the return type, the method name, and then the parameter type and the parameter. Yeah. Here's just a sample of how it looks. This is going to be public, private, and protected are going to be the ones that you'll probably use. Public and private is going to be the ones that we'll be using specifically. Public is going to allow us to access the function values inside Unity itself, where you can manipulate it through Unity. Private is just going to keep it internalized in that class that we're going to be creating. We're going to have a few functions. We're going to have a void function, and it's going to be two void functions. We're going to have a fixed update and an update function. This is just a structure that we'll be using. It's just standard C# structure on these. And you'll be passing the parameters as you would with most functions. So you'll be calling the name, and then internally as one of the parameters, you'll be including the type and then the variable. here's just to kind of reiterate the structure of it. So we have the classes. Inside the classes, we'll have the variables that are internal. They're local variables for that particular class. Yeah, just standard inheritance on these as well. It's pretty much standard. If you know one language, you'll probably be pretty good with C# isn't much different than Java and most other languages. So if you get lost anywhere, it's pretty easy to kind of get through it. Just because we're really not creating a full application, it's just going to be scripts. So you'll see what you mean once you'll see what I mean once you start working through it. Okay, so here's the main part. So we'll be creating a few variables. We're going to instantiate an object. It's going to be pointing to one of our classes that we have. And we're going to access the Unity API. And we're going to access two void functions. It says to two void functions, but there's going to be the fixed update and then just an update function in there. And we're going to be filling those in. And we're going to also call one of the methods from another script. So you'll have two classes, two scripts. One of them is going to be called character controller to the object. This is the one that's going to control the characters generally. We're not going to really do too much with this particular one. Where is it at? Yeah, this is just going to kind of take in the values. This is going to be the class we're going to be accessing. You don't really have to know a whole lot on what's going on in this one for this particular workshop. It just kind of controls a character if he's jumping, what to do if he jumps, which direction to face, just basic stuff like that. So we're not really going to be messing with this one. It's going to be the player movement that we'll be touching upon. All right. So the first thing we'll do is everyone good so far? Yeah, to see the code, you can go to your directory to the window panel that says project inside Unity, and if you go to the assets and then go to scripts, and you'll see both there. If you double click on it, on player movement, it'll open up. And this is where we'll be. We'll keep going. So this is the first thing we're going to do. We're going to create an instance of the character controller 2D that we have. Sorry. So inside player movement, let's go ahead and create a variable instance of the character controller 2D, and we're going to just name it controller. Let's do that first. Okay. Okay. We're going to make this public because we're going to be accessing it through Unity, and we're going to be assigning it to our character later. It's character controller 2D, and then this one's going to just be called controller. Okay, that's the first thing we'll do. The next thing we're going to do is we already have the void update and the fixed update created here. So let's go ahead and go inside update first. And here we're going to take in the user's input. And so let's go ahead and go back to our, let's go here. So I've created this so far. And then these are the two functions that we have created. The update, it runs at the frame rate of the game. But fixed update, it actually runs at the machine, the Unity's physics engines, the constant rate of the physics engine. So once you start using, when you start interacting with the environment, so like gravity or speed, that's where fixed update is going to probably, that's where it's going to come to play, as opposed to update is just the constant speed of the game. So go ahead and do that. All right, and we're going to create a variable that we're going to hold the user's input for the axis, so the left and right. And then we're also going to set a variable inside our animator panel to the speed of that input that we get. So let's go ahead and go there. And then just for reference, let's go back to here. So what we're going to essentially be doing is we're going to get the user's input from the keyboard, and we're going to get it based on this here. So the input manager, it actually takes in it already maps out the keyboard based on certain default settings that you have on your keyboard. It already has these mapped to the keyboard in here. So whenever the user presses a key relating to this, so in here it says left or right, that's the left or right arrow keys, and it'll return a horizontal with that variable. And so what we do in the actual code is we just create the variable here. And then we're going to access the input API, get access, and we're going to use raw here. And this essentially pulls in, it calls the API, the Unity API for input, and uses the get access raw function. And then here we're just going to input what we expect it to be. So in this case, it's going to be horizontal from our input manager. And then we're actually going to have to multiply this to give it an actual speed. And we'll create a constant speed here, constant variable here. So let's go ahead and create both. And in this particular case, I'm going to make a public float for our speed, our horizontal move, so that we can see a change in the actual Unity display. So let's go ahead and set it to 0 float. But our constant float here for our speed, I can make it private. I'll take care of that. So I would say, okay. So that takes care of this part here. Now, the next step that we're going to do, we're going to set the speed to the character through the animator window. So our animator window is here, right? If we go to our player, you'll see that we have speed here, and it has an input speed here as well. So if you run it, let's go ahead and run it. Okay, so you drop down. You won't be able to do anything if you press the keys. Let me pull up my on-screen keyboard here. If you push the keys, nothing's going to happen, right? Nothing happens. That's normal. But if you type in a number here, you'll see that the character moves. If you put a negative number, nothing happens, right? So it's essentially expecting a positive number here. So that's going to come to play here in a second. Go open up the script. So here we're going to do animator, because we're going to access the animator's, the API, Unity API's animator panel here. And we already created the object for that previously here. So that's where the animator comes from. And we're going to do a set float. And it's expecting a string and a float value. So the string is going to be this name here, the horizontal move. Oh, wrong way. It's going to actually be expecting two things. It's going to be expecting this name here first. That's the string. And then the horizontal move as the value for the float. Now the issue with this here is once you run it, it's actually gonna apply a negative number. So what we would need to do is make it apply the absolute on this one. That way it stays positive in either case. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and try that out for now. Okay, so I just updated the script. But once I saved it, it actually imported it back in here. And you can kind of get a hint of what's in there here now. And you'll see the variables are here now. And yeah, the rest of it's here. So let's go ahead and select our player. And then here you'll see you have controller now where it says none. This is where we're gonna have to associate our player. So if you grab player and you drag it on over, now it's associated to the player character here. So that way it controls the animator based on that character. So if you go down here to this animator window, it's the one that's associated to player. And likewise, that's what this controller is going to be passing out to. Okay, so I don't believe it. Yeah, nothing's going to happen so far yet. So far, it looks like everything's working. Let's leave that there. It says horizontal axis not set up yet. Okay. Is that what I did? Okay. All right. Yep. That's right. Okay, horizontal. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get the user's input once again, but in this case, we're not going to do the get access raw. That's just for directional. We're going to do is we're actually going to do an if statement. Oh, wait, dragon. Okay, let me go back. So if you go to the, okay, wait for this update. All right, so if you select the player here, you'll see on the right side, you have your components. You'll see player movement as one of the scripts. Right now, what we created was a controller. We made it public. Where's that? This year we made it public. And what that does is it allows us to manipulate it in here. And what we ended up doing is we dragged this player object from our hierarchy into the controller's input box here. All right. Let's go ahead and move on. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create an if statement here, a condition for if the player, basically if they press any of the other keys that we have mapped inside an input manager here. So currently I have 6, a size 6. By default, I think you're going to have 19 on the input manager. And that's just to cover like a 2-player game on the same keyboard, something like that. I downsized it to 6. I currently have the horizontal. I have a punch, a kick, fire, and jump, and then just a generic extra one in there if I decide to do something with it. But if you look at the names, these are the names we're going to be calling or referencing as a string variable with string value inside these if statements. And likewise, this is going to be what we're going to use for the input. But on our other end, over here in the animator, we're going to be referencing these variable names here, these parameter names. Okay, so let's go do this. We're going to access, you're going to use the input once again from the API. And this case can be get button down. And this one only expects the string name. So in this case, we're going to be doing for jump from our input manager. So we're going to do jump here. And we're going to set our Boolean jump here to true. And I'll explain a little bit more of this a little later. But this doesn't particularly pertain to anything here at the moment. This has to do with the Unity events. It's just to take care of some event that's going on when the collider of the character lands. I'll go over it a little bit later. But what's more important, we're going to do the animator here. We're going to access the animator set bool. And so what this does is it's going to jump out here and it's going to reference the variable we have here for jump is jumping. And it's going to either make it true or false. So this one expects the string name and the Boolean value. And so here the string name is going to be a string of is jumping. And here we're going to set it to, let's say, the jump. So it'll be true. The next thing we can do is we go ahead and set up the other three. And if you look here, I give you hints in the file what to look for. So this is going to be the string that the animator is going to be expecting for the input manager. And then on the right of that, that's going to be the parameter inside the animator. This is all for player. So let's go ahead and do the next one down. Let's do the punch. So if input down. And it's going to be punch. And this one only expects a string for this particular one. Yeah. Here we're going to set the animator for this one. And here we're actually using triggers. So the difference between these, if you look at the parameters, you'll have a float, integer, bool, and trigger. The float's going to be this input window. A bool will be a square. And the triggers are going to be little circles. That's how you can kind of tell the difference between them. So here we're going to set trigger. And then this is going to be hard punch. String. Hard punch. That's right here. Let's go ahead and create the others while we're at it. So input dot get button down, same as before. This one's going to just be kick. Animator dot set trigger. Hard kick. And then finally, we'll do this one here, input once more, get button down, and this one will just be blast. And then the animator for this one will be the blast. And then the final step here to pass it along to the character for it to move properly. So let's go ahead and save it. We'll jump back here. And then while that's loading, so this is essentially what we did. We went through, we used the input, we accessed the interface for input that's a part of the Unity. And then we got to get access raw from there. And then the animators, after that, we passed along our value from horizontal move to the player's animator variable or parameter speed, but we made it the absolute value, so it'll stay positive. We multiplied it by a constant speed, which was 65 float there. And then we went back into our animator panel, and then we referenced the parameters that we have there. And of course, the available parameters here at the bottom, it's the float speed, bool is jumping, triggers are going to be hard punch, hard kick, and blast. And so you can actually run it if you select these in the window. You'll see it move and animate without actually filling in the script. Let's go ahead and try that. So if you'll see here, just by selecting the value here and triggering it just through the animator, you'll see it move. And you can see here at the bottom where the animator is transitioning through. So right now it's just going the idle. If you do hard punch, it goes to the hard punch transition. Now at this point, I believe we would only have to do one last thing. Yeah. So if you end up trying to use the keys here, let me go ahead and pull it up. Yeah, I don't think it's working. Okay. Yeah, so if you select the right arrow key here for it to move, you'll see the value change inside the speed float here, but the issue you'll have is that he's not moving anywhere. And this has to do with that second script. We have to make the call to that second script and pass along the values. And so let's go ahead and do that here. And you can leave it running as well. If your computer can handle multiple things, you can leave this running and you can see a change in real time practically. So what we'll do is we'll create the function to access the function here. Yes, yeah, we've already used the set trigger here. So it should work if yeah. So if you go ahead and hit the keys here that you have mapped. In my case, I have the punch set to A to Z for a positive and alt positive. Let me go ahead and pull up the horizontal jump and fire. Get button down. Yeah, so yeah, let's go to the input manager. Let's make sure we have that set up correctly on your system. Let's go there. You gotta edit, and then if you go to project settings, it'll open up the window. I already have it saved here in my window panels, so it's this one here that I have on the lower left. This is what opens up if you go to edit, project settings, and if you go down to where it says input manager, that's where your keys are mapped. And this is the input for you to reference. In the horizontal, you'll have negative button left and positive button right, which is how I have it here, left and right for the positive and negative buttons. For punch, I have positive button A, alt positive button Z. For kick, I have S for the positive and X for the alt positive. Fire, the positive button is D, alt positive is C. And then jump has the up. So the up arrow key, that's going to trigger the jump. And here's a reference for those. All right, here's the other step that we did. We created the condition for our input of jump. And then these are the other animator set triggers for punch, kick, and fire. These are the other conditions that we created. Okay. And then if you run it. Okay, I think I see. You went inside the folder, you went inside the subfolder, but you're actually selecting the actual folder, not going into the folder, but just the Unity 2D workshop. So if you back out of that folder one folder outwards. Okay. All right, so if you hit your keys here now, you should have it working if you have them all mapped correctly. And of course, the other catch here is you do have to select the game window panel here. You have to click on it so that it takes in your user input. Otherwise, if you click anywhere else, any other window, it won't take your input. So it's a little misleading, but you do have to click the game scene here, the game window. Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and move on. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create the access to the character controller. And we're going to reference controller, which is the instance of the object that we created up here. And do move to access the controller's move function in there. And it's going to be expecting two things. It's going to be expecting the float, which is going to be our directional, and the bool jump, which is going to be for the Unity events. And then let's go ahead and pass the horizontal. And jump. Now there's going to be an issue with this here. I'll go ahead and show what that is. So when it applies that horizontal move value here, it's going to make it launch off because it's not going to take into account the time. So it's not going to be linear. It's just it just launches off. That makes sense. We have to apply a fixed delta time to this for it to act properly. And we just do it here. So we'll do time dot fixed delta time. Save it. Here now the character can move around. He jumps, and this is using the keyboard arrow keys. I'll go ahead and use the ones on the screen. There you go. So that's how yours should react. You should actually be able to move through the screen from left and right based on the coordinates. All right. And this is that move function that we're calling. So it just takes in the vector of the character where he's at and applies a smooth dampen, which essentially just kind of, it allows the acceleration from the character's current coordinates to where you want it to be. And then the if move, this bottom part, it essentially just flips the character 180 on the horizontal axis. And then this if M grounded and jump is just another little helper condition to allow the character to know when it's touching the ground. So the next thing we're going to be touching up on is going to be the colliders. And there's a few different types. There's a static collider and a rigid body collider. In this particular case, we're using static rigid body colliders on our character. And the static colliders is going to be the ones that are on our objects that it interacts with. So if you left click on the character, on the player character, you'll see this little outline where there's a rectangle and a circle. And these are going to be the rigid body and the box colliders. Let's go ahead and go there. Yeah, our box collider is the top one, and the circle collider is the lower one. These essentially allow the character to interact with the environment, and this basically allows it to land on another collider and keep it from falling through the objects, because there's there's something there for it to run into. So this object, this player object, is interacting with the floor there. So if we were to go ahead and access our stage here at the bottom, and if I were to turn off that box collider, the characters are just gonna fall through. So that's what the colliders are for. It's there for you to be able to interact with the environment. Okay. So what we're gonna do in this next step is we're gonna add a collider to that floating stage at the top. It's titled Invisible Stage L. So it currently only has one component that's gonna be for transform. Okay. So that's this one here. Let's go ahead and add one. In this case, I would suggest a capsule collider for the shape of it. And you do have to be mindful if the direction is vertical or horizontal. And we're going to be doing the horizontal here. Now, if you click this little button where it says Edit Collider, this is going to allow you to adjust the size, and you can stretch it from here. And you'll see the little handles. And all you'll do is just pull it to fit the shape, the rough shape of the object. So now if we hit play, you should just land. Yep. So it just gave it an obstacle for it to interact with, and it's because of the gravity through the physics engine, it just lands on it. There's a few different colliders. There's a box collider, circle collider, capsule collider, but these are available for both 3-dimensional games and 2-dimensional games. And it's just going to be assigned the naming convention on it. It's just going to say 2D for 2D games, and it's just not going to say anything for the 3D games. It'll just say box collider, circle collider, and capsule collider. Yeah. And this is kind of a summarization of what we did. All right, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to play with our physics materials. The physics materials basically just allows you to apply certain attributes to the surrounding environment for the character to interact with in different ways. And the main ones is going to be bit bouncy and slipperiness. So the friction level of one and how it rebounds on the other. And I've already had 2 created. If you go to game scene, there's 2 here. It's going to be bouncy and slippery. And if you look at the inspector here in the window, you'll see the attributes for each of those. Under bouncy, we have bounciness to 1, friction to 0. And then for slippery, we have bounciness to 1. Is that right? No. Yeah, bouncy. The slippery is going to have friction to 0 and bounciness to 0. And so what we can do here, let's turn this off. If you select that top invisible stage L, there's this little input here for material. It says none at the moment. That's for these materials. And so if you select bounciness and you drag it to that window, that's applying that material attribute to that capsule collider now that we created. Now, if you hit play, you'll see that the character is going to bounce at this point. So that's how those materials work. And here's a few examples of how it would interact in other cases. So this is the correct way with that particular material. It'll just bounce indefinitely. Here's 2 other examples of how it would possibly run. If the collider was applied, but you didn't apply the material correctly or it was a wrong material, it would probably just land. If you somehow applied the collider to the wrong object in the scene, it would not interact with the character in that way. So you would not have the character run into that floating surface at all. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do, we're just going to build it. So from here on out, you're just going to go to the window where it says File, Build and Run. Okay. All right, it's going. Okay, one. Okay. All right, so it looks like it's done. Let me move it over. So it's running. It currently ran, but it's running on my second screen. Let me see if I can get it over. One other thing to check, you'll probably have this already set on yours for your build settings, just because it's a part of the project. It should have already been assigned to PC, Mac, Linux standalone. This should be what's currently configured. If you go to your build settings under File, and here's the other options you'll be able to build for. So Android, WebGL, Universal Windows, and all these other ones. So the one that we'll be doing here is going to be this, the first one, the PC, Mac, and Linux standalone. And of course, you can do the build run here. Let me see if I can pull it over. Yeah, so you should have a folder now inside your folder. It should say build, and you'll have these there. Let's see if I can open it here. And okay, so it's opening on my other screen. Let me see if I can switch screens. So, and one thing to be mindful as well is when you create the dimensions of your game, you have to kind of know already what you're expecting it to have for the dimensions. If you'll see, it's actually pulling off, it's bleeding off screen. So that's one thing to be mindful about. And if you're wondering, the character, the female character here, she's following the character's coordinates. That's all that's going on down there. Okay, let me switch screens. All right. So just to reiterate, this is just the settings that you'll have on yours, but you'll be able to choose this once you create your own game in the future. And that is all for today. Okay. I guess, does anyone have any questions? You're welcome, guys. Oh, someone asked about the files. Let's see if I can find them. They're inside the directory. Let me try to see if I can see where I put them at. Wait. Yeah, if you go to the directory, the root directory here, if you go to Unity Workshop, there's a folder named Files. This is the files that you find inside the Unity Workshop. And then original files, that's where the finished files are. You can just drag those in if you want to just see the final product. That's really pretty much it. And of course, I do have to mention that the sprites that we use in this particular workshop, you would be best to look online at any open source location. These are just sample ones that I decided to choose for this particular workshop. But if you're going to be creating an actual game, you do have to be mindful about that and just make sure that there's licenses, that the open source license is available for whatever sprites, whatever source files you use, all the images, all that sort of stuff. Unity has assets that you can find that are free, that are available for you to use. That's probably the best source to find starting files. But really, the best thing you can do is just create your own. You can get the full scope of how it is and how the animations affect the gameplay. So you'll run into how many frames you'll need to make the character look the way that it looks, and it is pretty. There's quite a few frames for a lot of these animations, so it'd be best to either purchase them from someone that's creating them, because it does take a lot of work, or creating your own. That's really the best bet. So for like this particular, let's go ahead and run it so I can show you guys. So if you look at the character here, it says Ken Blast. That's 11 frames total, and that's just for it to do this one move. Let me go ahead and he fell off. Okay. Let me start it over. So for him to just do this, that's 11 total frames. Just keeping that in mind. The player input. Where is this? Where do you mean? You mean from the keyboard? For the key inputs? Right, yeah, so it responds to the user's inputs. The input manager, if you go to edit, project settings, you'll see this window here. And this is where all those keys are mapped using Unity's engine. It kind of manages everything. So you'll get the user's inputs assigned here. And the horizontal move, the left and right, is literally left and right, as in the left and right keys of the keyboard. And then the punch, kick, fire, jump, those are likewise assigned to their own key. The jump is the up arrow key, and then the other ones have their respective ones. They're in the slides, but essentially that's what that does. And then what that ends up working is through the if statements in that script. It then triggers the animator one associated with it. So when we dragged over the object, the player object, we dragged it into the controller's input here. That's how we're able to assign it to these particular ones. Any other questions? Did you select the game window, the actual panel? You have to actually select it for it to take your inputs. So if you click out any out here, you'll see by the little blue line. That's how you know where you're at, where you're what window you're accessing. If you don't have the game window selected with the little blue line up at the top, your inputs aren't going to work. If you press the keys, the only time it'll work is if you have the game selected. Yeah, you have to select it there, and there it goes. You can zoom in and zoom out, but this actual game window here, you got to make sure you have the display here changed. You can create a standalone one as well. You can adjust that here though. So you go to display one, you can create a custom one, and the particular one I decided to use for this case is just 1280 by 426. I believe it should have already been set up from the project, but if not, you can create those dimensions. Hey, James, are you referring to this window here, this game window? And did you adjust the scale at the top? I mean, the main thing that'll matter, I think, is going to be this here, though, the display dimensions. And then just make sure you're under game. If you go to scene, the scene's going to be something else. It'll be this other window here. And you can still manipulate the game through here as well. You just won't see the final result. Yeah, go ahead and change that. You can change it if you'd like. Or you could always move things around to where it fits it. But yeah, the main one that I was using for this was 1280 by 426. That's weird. Okay, I gotcha. All right, that makes sense. You can also change the material on that first object. You can change it with the slippery one as well if it's bothering you as you're working on it, or you could take it off completely. You're welcome. Anyone else have any other questions? All right. So that's it for today. That's all.
All right, thank you guys, everyone, for coming today. It's a great workshop. Orlando, you did really well. I'm sure everybody learned a lot. We will be having our game jam in a week, I believe. About a week left. So make sure you guys come out to that. If you guys do have any more questions, you can always DM us on the Discord. If you're in the Discord, if you registered, you should have gotten an email to join the Discord. Yeah, that's it. The recording for this will be live on YouTube, as well as everyone will get an invite, a link sent to their email for the recording of this workshop. Any last thoughts or questions, anyone? Awesome. Thank you guys for coming. Have a good night.